This next bit here is extremely important. When it comes to the analytical side, everything really plays into this. Okay. Authenticity plus relatability. Okay, this is authenticity, this is relatability. When it comes to socializing in any aspect, always be yourself, always be authentic. Never ever compromise your authenticity. But as we talked about, it's being yourself, but also making sure that it connects. Expressing it in a calibrated, relatable manner so that it's a win-win.
Anything within this circle is you being congruent. Okay, we talked about this. Thoughts, words, actions aligned. And don't get too myopic with this idea of congruency, right? We think that there's only one thing at any point in time that we're congruent and that feels authentic to us, right? At this point in time, I just want to clap my hands. That's the one thing that's me being authentic. But that's not true. There's actually a million things that you can be doing at this point in time that are also authentic to you. Okay, don't get myopic. Don't get stuck on one thing. There are a million. And your job in an interaction, whether it's a person, a group, you name it, is to always act within that circle of authenticity. Never, ever compromise it for any reason at all. But because an interaction is not just you, it's not a one-person show, right? Part of your intention should be to also make it relatable to the person or the people you're interacting with. So it's always authenticity plus relatability. And the key is finding the sweet spot right here, the overlap. That's where you want to be operating in. Because if right now you're just operating on the authenticity side and it's not relatable, it's a win for you, you could say. Now, going deeper, it's actually not, because your intention is to also connect to the person or people. But you could say it's a win for you, but it's a lose for whoever's talking to you.
Say you were to meet someone new, right? And you're in the first couple minutes of talking to that person. And you tell yourself, hey, I'm going to be authentic. And you start telling them all your baggage, all the things that happened to you in your childhood, like all just unloading on the person, right? Is that you being authentic?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? You're like, hey, I'm being authentic. Is it you being relatable? No. So that's acting, if you will, within this circle of authenticity, but outside of the circle of relatability.
Now, on the other side, sometimes you'll find people who compromise their authenticity for relatability. And this is the people pleaser, right? It's the, what do they like? Let me not, I want to say yes, but let me say no to please them. And you would think that it's a win for them and a lose for you, right? That's lose-win. But as you know, the rule, if it's not win-win, everyone loses. So you must find the sweet spot. And the way you do this is simply by playing a game you've probably played during your childhood called Battleship, right? Where whenever you talk to someone or a situation, and we're going to go deeper on this, like there are some tells that'll give you a general idea of where the sweet spot is. But then from there, it's you just really trial and erroring it, where just like playing Battleship, you got to guess where the ship is. You want to sink the ship, you got to guess, right? So say I'm talking to someone, I know, okay, based upon what the gist of what I feel from this person or what might have been introduced, you could say contextually to me prior to talking to them, I know that they might not resonate with this type of extreme humor, right? This is something I always do because, again, my humor is pretty out there. So I might know, okay, this is a little too far out there for them, so I'm just not going to start there. I know the ship's not there. I'm not going to sink the ship there. But maybe it's around here. So I might say a joke that's very authentic to me, but that somehow, for some reason, isn't relatable to the person. So it's possible that you start here, right? You try to find the ship and you mess up. And we'll talk about this. Then you'll have to calibrate. And what people do is they just really commit to and get attached to that course of action or that joke, where instead of being like, I do the joke, it's not relatable, let me change courses of action, they just keep on doubling down, and that's the terrible approach. I'm going to be like, the ship's not here, let me try something else. How about this? Oop, still not there. How about this? Still not there. Oh, there it is. And I find the sweet spot. So you will have to play Battleship. Sometimes you'll do it and you'll hit the sweet spot. Awesome. Sometimes you'll have to calibrate and work your way there. Okay. This is once more the foundation when it comes to social awareness. Now, a couple things here. Sometimes, no matter what, there won't be any overlap. Okay. Sometimes you're going to try to find that ship and try to find that ship and try to find that ship, and there is no ship to sink. And that there's when you are interacting with someone you're simply not meant to get along with. And that's one of the big lies that we've all been conditioned on, which is you should get along with everyone and everyone should get along with you. But that's going against nature and it's not normal, right? All of us here, if we all hung out, there's going to be people in this group that you get along with more than others. And it doesn't mean that the people you don't get along with, you don't like them. It just means that there is no natural chemistry. Okay. And that's where it's, hey, nice to meet you. Not meant to be with this person. Not meant to talk to this person. Not meant to be friends with this person. Not meant to work with this person. Whatever it is. Okay. This will happen. And a big trap people fall into when this happens is they self-attack over it. They think that it has something to do with them and that they got rejected and it takes a hit on their self-worth, and that is delusional. Okay, no. A lot of times, a quote-unquote rejection is simply you meeting someone you're not meant to be with. And you should be happy, right? You find that out sooner. The only way to be with this person or to connect to this person is to compromise your authenticity and to be a people pleaser. And that's terrible. Okay, so do keep this in mind. This will happen.
But also understand that this sweet spot is not static. There are three things that you could say expand it. Number one is value. The more value you have, the more the sweet spot will expand. And the more of your authenticity you can let shine. Okay? For example, say in a work setting, an employee says a joke that's a little out there. It will be less relatable to the other employees. Maybe some will laugh, but they might hold their laughter in because it's not that relatable than say the boss made that exact same joke. If the boss did it because they have more value, it's more acceptable. Right? It's more relatable. The same way where if you take a rock star, celebrity, they could wear crazy things and you're gonna be like, oh, well, of course, versus your average person in the street. Average person in the street, you're probably like, what are they doing? Now, that doesn't mean you can't do that. If you were to actually say, talk to that average person in the street and they had a strong reality, you'd be like, oh, of course, because now you know them. But at first glance, a little bit less than the celeb. Value expands the sweet spot. Comfort is the second one that expands the sweet spot. We took that example of unloading your baggage, right? At first, it's not appropriate. But say you spend a lot of time with that person. There's a lot of comfort. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. Now the sweet spot actually grew where it is relatable to start opening up, say, about your personal life or your baggage or whatnot. So value, and the more effective you are at also displaying that and communicating your value, the larger the sweet spot. Comfort, and then the last one is environment, context, right? Where, say we take that work setting, say you're with a bunch of coworkers and you make a joke, they might be like, oh, it's kind of not appropriate for the work thing, I don't know. But say you were to now move environments and you're hanging out with those same colleagues outside of a work setting, the sweet spot's a lot larger. Same people, same situation, just a different context, a different environment. So value, comfort, context.
In any social situation, any situation in life, always ask yourself, what's the context? That's the first question you should ask yourself, right? What's the context? Meaning, if you're in a conversation, whether it's with one person or a group, ask yourself, what's the context of, number one, this conversation, right? What's appropriate to this conversation? If, I were to jump into a conversation and everyone's talking about, say, stocks and investment, and suddenly I'm like, hey, by the way, you ever hear about letting go? It's not appropriate to the context. Get it? Like there's a certain established topic or general topics that they're talking about. And if you act just out of left field, it's going to be like, wait, what are you talking about? Right? So what's appropriate to the context? So the conversation of the person, right? Who's this person or people? What's their currency, as we discussed before? What is valuable to them? And then the environment. And whenever you're not acting in a way that's, you could say, appropriate to these three things, you will produce this thing called cringe. You ever heard the term cringy? Like what makes us cringe? It's when someone does something that isn't appropriate to those three things. Okay, that's a lack of social calibration of social awareness, right? It's like when something's a little bit off, that's why. If you ever cringe in conversation or something like, oh, that was kind of a vibe killer, that's why. Okay, now, to be clear though, going a little bit more nuanced on this doesn't mean that you must always be this, you could say, kind of chameleon, like, oh, what's the context, and always adapting. Sometimes you can impose a new context, right? Like if you join a conversation and say, everyone's talking about, say, finance, right? Like stocks, and you come in and your frame, as we also previously discussed, is a lot stronger, and say their frames are very weak, they're very reactive, and you're just like, by the way, you ever hear about letting go? You could actually impose that. Okay, so it's a bit more nuanced, but biggest thing in terms of social awareness is whether or not you're going to impose that new frame, you better ask yourself, what's the context? You better be aware of it at all times. Okay, then of course, what's appropriate to the context, and you can always stretch it a bit, but I was like, once more, within authenticity, appropriate to the context. And then another key question is, does it add to the vibe? Okay, does it add to the vibe? Anything that takes away from the vibe, a vibe killer, inherently low value, lack of social awareness. Okay, an example I've used for years too was, say I'm doing a live event and I'm talking about a certain topic, right? Or say we're talking about this right now, social calibration. Say one of you is like, hey, raise my hand, I have a question. And say I'm like, okay, what's your question? And say your question has nothing to do with this topic here, what would happen? It wouldn't add to the value, it would kill our flow, and it would communicate massive lack of social awareness, aka low value. Right? If someone's like, by the way, so I was out yesterday and I was a little scared to say hi to someone. What do I do? Say someone asked that right now. Everyone would cringe inside, like, why? Right? Not appropriate to the context, doesn't add to the vibe, right? The same with if someone, say, asks a question and talks for 20 minutes. That there, although you could say the person has great intentions, right? It could be a great question. If they start, or say they share something, like, hey, I have something to share that would really add value to this. Say I'm like, oh, share away. And they start talking for 20, 30 minutes, it's gonna actually be low value. Why? Because you aren't here to listen to them, right? It's the same as if I went to a comedy show and I'm like, can I come on stage and tell some jokes too? Everyone would be like, no, we didn't fucking come here to see you. But my jokes are good. Doesn't matter. We didn't come here to see you. But it's authentic. Doesn't matter. We're not here to see you. It's not appropriate to the context. Okay. And there's tells, right? Like this is not just black and white. It's a feeling you develop, right? Like you could start sharing a story and for the first minute, it's actually valuable and everyone's locked in. But as soon as you pass that minute mark, you're going to start seeing people like, cringe is activated. No, because it's not appropriate. Okay. So these are the foundations when it comes to authenticity or relatability.
Whenever you're talking to someone or a group of people, there's a certain vibe, a dynamic that's being built. Right now we're building something together. There are things you can say that add to it. There are things you can say that take away from it. Make sure it's always adding. The same when you eat with friends, the same when you go out to dinner with someone, you're building something together. And you'll see when someone says something that's a little bit, takes away from the vibe. It could even be interrupting someone at the wrong time or bringing up some topic that you already all talked about. It's like, oh, I thought we were done with that topic. Takes away. Never take away from the vibe. And here it really comes down to being creative, right? The more creative you are, the more you'll be able to find that sweet spot and be authentic. Never compromise that authenticity, but do get creative in terms of how you express it so it does connect with people and it's a win-win.